Welcome to Wealth Break, real conversations about money, mindset, and growth, meant to keep you informed while you're on the go. It's vacation season, so I'm here solo today, but we wanted to make sure that we continue to keep that content coming your way, so let's get into it.
So, can you paint us a picture of what your childhood looked and felt like?
Yeah, my childhood was fantastic. I really have no regrets about the way that I grew up. I always like to say I don't really have any childhood trauma that I feel like I'm really trying to get over. And I feel really blessed in that way. But two family household, mother and father met at General Motors on the assembly line many, many moons ago. They've been now married. We're approaching 50 years for how long they've been married, which is amazing. And I actually come from a family where I saw a lot of that, right? My mother and father have been married well over 40 years. My grandparents on both sides were married over 50 years. And I really had a very, very stable family life. Spent a lot of time with family and cousins growing up. I was talking to my wife the other day and we were talking about like how we grew up and we were talking about vacations. And I was saying that we didn't really take vacations though. It was more so we're going to visit family.
Mhm.
So because our family was dispersed all over the country, we had family in Chicago, we had family in New York, we had family in the South. A lot of our trips were largely kind of centered around going to visit family and what I would call some of the matriarchs of our family. And that was exciting, right? You couldn't wait till summer to the family reunion so you could go be around your cousins. And from a stability standpoint though, very middle class life. And I was really fortunate in that way, where a lot of the friends that I had accumulated over my years in school, I realized that certain things were different about their life. They didn't have two parents in the home, or their parents weren't married, or their parents weren't working really stable jobs, right? My father worked at General Motors for 37, 38 years, right? And that's just a very, very different life than what we see today, where the average person is at a job for, 1, 2, 3 years, and then they're moving consistently. And I do think that part of my upbringing really kind of led me down this path of can I get a career and can I be successful in that career and just work it for a really long time? And that is something that I think I had to unlearn because I realized that it's just different times, right? This isn't, the 1960s or 70s where you're going to have one job for 30 or 40 years. I think in order to really accumulate, wealth and start to kind of climb professionally, you're going to have to make some bets. And some of those bets are going to require movement here and there.
Mhm. When was the first time that you noticed your friends not having the same home environment that you did? Can you paint us a picture of a memory?
Yeah. I think that, I remember vividly being 12 years old and I think seventh grade. And I was very materialistic as a kid. I don't know that I've completely grown out of that. So I will give myself some grace. And be honest about it. But I was very materialistic as a kid. And I remember being in science class and one of my good friends today, still to this day, but was new to me at the time, turned next to me um and said, "Why is everything that you wear Tommy Hilfiger? Like, do you not have anything that's not Tommy Hilfiger?" And to me, I just thought that that was normal, and my entire wardrobe was Tommy
Who okay,
Hilfiger.
but why Tommy Hilfiger?
I mean, you gotta think this is, like, early 2000s, like, 90s going into the early 2000s. Um, Tommy Hilfiger was, like, creme de la creme, right? If you turned on your television and you watched your favorite, rap artist or R&B artist, they were, like, draped in Tommy
Oh,
Hilfiger.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a time where Tommy Hilfiger was
That's
literally
crazy.
yeah.
Cause right now, like, I think of Tommy Hilfiger as, like, very much like the guy that, like, golfs, very suburban type of energy.
No.
That's
So
wild.
so if you kinda, like, track, like, streetwear culture, and you go back to, like, the early '90s, you have the rise of Tommy Hilfiger and you have the rise of Polo. There's an entire group of people in New York City called the Lowheads that are known for boosting Polo, Ralph Lauren. And literally, they're still active to this day. It's not as popular as it once was, but they would literally go from store to store trying to track down like the best polo outfits. So if you see like a Snow Beach polo shirt, or jacket, that was like a really prized possession back then. So yeah, it was Polo and Tommy Hilfiger. Then it became Nautica. I went through a whole school year where all I wore was Nautica. And then that started to transition in the early 2000s into a lot of the artists, particularly in like urban music, starting to have their own labels. So that's where you see the rise of, a Rockaware, which was Jay-Z's label, or Fat Farm with Russell Simmons or Academics, et cetera, et cetera. So I've always been kind of into that world in clothes, but that was one of the first kind of instances where it was like, something about you is different. And I realized that my parents were actually in a financial position to be able to do that
Yeah.
because it was significantly more expensive to wear all Tommy Hilfiger or all Nautica in those days than, it was to wear some of the other brands that were not quote unquote name brand. And then from there, realizing that, people were kind of doing the shuffle on the weekends. Well, this weekend I'm going to my dad's house, or this weekend I'm going to be with my mom, or this weekend I'm going to, you know, I'm going to be at my grandma's house because, my mom is traveling and my dad's not around. And you started to hear some of these stories that were very, very different than my household, right? There was no such thing as mom and dad's house, separately, right? Home was home and mom and dad were both there all
Mhm.
the time. To be quite frank, I don't really remember more than 4 or 5 days in my entire life that my parents have not slept next to each other. Like, I would struggle to get to 4 or 5 days that I can remember. To be
Wow.
quite frank, right now, off the top of my head, I can't really remember 3. So they're
Wow.
very, very much joined at the hip, and that was a very, very different life than I saw elsewhere.
And so how do you think that made you who you are today?
I think that it made me, um, want stability, and to me, that's what my childhood was. It was stability, and that that's a lot more attractive today than I think I gave it credit for back then.
Mhm.
But I think that that's why, I was one of the first people in my friend group to get married.
Mm.
Not necessarily because I was ready to get married or I knew that I was supposed to be married, but it was more so like, if I think I found this person, then I think that this is what I'm supposed to do because this is what I've seen, right? I had a lot of examples of that. And I think hindsight, now many years later, I realized that that decision to live a more stable life has made my life a lot more simple,
Mhm.
and it's made it a lot better. I think my quality of life, is much better having, a companion and also not chasing something
Mhm.
that many people are longing for companions, right? So you're constantly looking for it in all the right or wrong places, depending on who you ask. But it's something that I don't feel like I still have to go out and find. I have it.
Okay, but I'm thinking more of the word stability, and it sounds like that's your thing.
Mhm.
Like you're really on stability. What are the detriments to being the goal?
Yeah, I think when you're really focused on being stable, I think that you take less risk. I think, Rodney and I talk about this all the time. I think we're a great team and I think we're great partners because his risk tolerance is significantly higher than mine. And you need someone who has a lower risk tolerance because you need to make sure the boxes get checked,
Mhm.
right? Rodney's not the box checker. He's the one who has the ideas and the vision and the plan, and I'm more like the executor.
Mhm.
But I think what we've been able to do, right? And then my risk tolerance is higher than, someone on our legal or compliance team, as an example, right? So you have these different types of personality and you have these different responsibilities. But I think what I've been able to do really well is kind of land in the middle, right? You have to take into consideration what the most risk adverse talent on your team would have, or the most
Mhm.
risk averse people would have. But you also have to be cognizant of there's something really special over here with a higher risk tolerance that's going to lead to more innovation.
Mhm.
And I think when you can find that middle ground, there's this really exciting opportunity that gets created where you can be innovative,
Mhm.
but you can do it in a way that you're not exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. But I think in short, I think being more stable and being focused on stability, you will take less risk. And I think my father and my mother are probably a testament of that,
Yeah.
right? This is I make a good living, my family is stable, I'm happy, and this is just what I'm gonna do for almost 40 years and be comfortable with that. I think that I've surrounded myself with some people who were risk takers,
Mhm.
and I think that I've absorbed some of that, right? I'm still not extreme, but I am much more um open to taking risks than I probably ever thought that I would be.
So if there's, like,
Yeah.
any moment where you were like, "Okay, whoa, this
Yeah.
is, like, too much for me."
Yeah. I mean, when we go back to the start of Solo, um, we had this idea in 2015, and I didn't go full time until 2017, right? So I kind of had this idea. I actually had selected another person to be the CEO of this company because I didn't want to do it. Um, I was willing to be involved, but I didn't wanna be the main person, right? I didn't want the buck to stop here. I didn't necessarily wanna be I didn't wanna be front and center all the time. Like, I don't many people close to me because I am very outspoken would think that I want to be the center of attention, but I really don't. Like, it's something that I think I've learned how to be comfortable being in the seat, but it's not something that I've long desired to be, right? It's just not my personality. That said, I realized that, in order for this to really work, it was going to have to be me. And that took 2 years of me kind of coaching myself and telling me, "Hey, you can do this," and, kind of taking away some of the imposter syndrome that I think that I had where it was I didn't come from a tech background, and I'm not a technical founder, and it's like, "Oh, you're gonna start a tech company." You're just gonna be pretending to be someone else 24/7, and, people aren't gonna take you serious, and you don't have the background, and you don't have the resume, and all of the reasons like, I came up with a bunch of reasons why I shouldn't do it. And then the more I started to see that it wasn't gonna work if I didn't do it, that's the moment that I decided it was worth the risk. Because at the end of the day, and I think my father told me this, he told me that, you know, the worst thing that could happen is that you just have to go back to work and get another job. And your resume that you've built in the corporate world is going to allow you to do that. So what is really the risk? I think the
Mhm.
risk is actually not doing it versus going and trying. And, I think that I have such a fear of failure that, I would really rather like die than lose. Like I'm ultra competitive. Like I don't work out, but I promise you, if someone says I'll do more push-ups than you, like my arms will fall off before I quit. And I think that that's been really what's allowed me to be successful is a very healthy or unhealthy fear of failure, but also the fact that I'm just ultra competitive.
Why did it have to be you?
I think that it had to be me because I I understood the market so well, and I understood why people needed this product that we've built.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel like others who were building products adjacent to the space in which we exist really understood the demographic as
Mhm.
well. And I didn't feel like they could speak the language. Like a lot of particularly with black and brown communities, there is a cash grab in our communities. And that cash grab has everything to do with people know that there's an opportunity there. They know that people are under resourced. They know that people need access to capital. But because they don't come from the community, they don't respect the community in the way that I think that they should. And I think they extract more than what they actually deposit into
Mhm.
these communities. And I think that it was important for me to knowing that for me to do something about it and for me to for me to be able to speak the language to investors about this demographic and make it salient for them to understand the opportunity but also still be able to communicate with the community that we support
Yeah.
in a way that feels authentic because it is authentic. It's not we went out and we work with this PR agency, or we went out and we work with this consulting group to understand how to speak to this community.
Mhm.
This is something that we uniquely know how to do because we come from it. And that to me was very different than what I had seen anywhere else.
Does that kind of cash grab make you angry?
Um, I don't think that it makes me angry, but it does disappoint me. And it disappoints me for a few different reasons. It disappoints me because I think that a lot of individuals who are probably should be situated to service these communities and participate in the opportunity and create wealth from these opportunities, those individuals are never given that opportunity.
Yeah.
And because it really has a lot to do with your resources. And if you don't have the resources, it's very difficult for you to have the impact that you would like to have.
Mhm.
I think that I'm not angry about it because at the end of the day, these are opportunities and they're to be seized by whoever is going to seize them. I think sometimes I have some disappointment with some of the communities who need access to some of these products that they don't necessarily read through the line of authenticity and who has their best interests at heart. Um, they kind of go with who's spending the most money. And if you're only focused on who's going to spend the most money, because maybe more eyeballs are on that product because they can spend the money to make sure it's in front of you.
Mhm.
But if you don't do your diligence and you don't see that there's something else better out there, there's a little bit of disappointment that we continue to keep going down the same path and expecting different results. So I would say more disappointment than anger.
Disappointment. Well, what does make you angry?
Hmm. I think when individuals don't do what they say they're going to do, that frustrates me and makes me pretty angry. And that has everything to do with the political landscape, that has everything to do with the financial landscape, it has everything to do with, you know, there's so many people that I encounter on a day-to-day basis, right? It could even be an investor who says, "Hey, I'm gonna do XYZ,"
Yeah.
and then they don't do XYZ.
What stories stick with you about your family, especially ones that make you feel like this is why I am who I am?
Yeah. Um, I think I think my mother and father really just tried to instill in me and my brother and I just like to do the right thing, right? To have a high sense of integrity and um, really kind of like the whole treat others how you want to be treated, right? And when I think about that, I think that that has a lot to do with what I decided to go do with my professional life, right? So like the years working in finance, as an advisor, and then you think about the business that we built here at Solo. It's like kind of build the thing that we would want if we were in the position
Mhm.
that of someone who needed what we provide today. But I mean, I think my father just really instilled in me work hard, right? When he was waking up and 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and, my mother is working 3rd shift. I'm kinda waking up and getting myself ready for school in the morning and going to school, but, that taught me that everyone has a job to do, and they're already off working their actual jobs, and your job is to get yourself up and get ready for school, and go to school and, do as well as you possibly can, because I think that a lot of my parents what they tried to instill in me was that education was going to kind of be my lane to freedom. And, coming from a family that was more blue collar in nature, going to college wasn't something that was, you know, normal for my family. It happened not necessarily with my parents' generation, but most of the kids went to college or the military, right? It's kind of like you had to do one or the other. And my brother chose the military and I chose college. And I think that, he's off doing really, really well and it worked out for him. And I think that was the right move for him. But I also felt a little bit of a burden of like, well, somebody has to go to college. Like one of the two of us have to go to college. So I guess it's gonna be me.
Mhm.
I never really talked about it before, but like I didn't really like go to college with the intention on graduating. Kind of went to college with the intent of well, I gotta at least be able to say I went to college.
Mhm.
And because I didn't really feel like I was necessarily like super well equipped to go be successful in college. I knew that I wanted to make money. I knew that one day I wanted to have some type of I wanted to be in a position to make money. My mother sent me a note, I don't know, probably about a year ago now of a letter that I wrote, which was saying that I want to be an entrepreneur one day and I want to make $100,000. I used to think $100,000 was $10 million, but I knew somehow I needed to do something to make money, but I didn't know exactly what that would be. But when I went to college, and I started to realize that I actually can do it, I started to build a lot of confidence. But I didn't necessarily go into college having that. And thankfully, I surrounded myself with some good peers who actually went to college feeling like they had no other option and they were going to be successful no matter what.
Mhm.
And some of that rubbed off on me. I think that I've done a really, really good job of putting people around me that motivated me. And, even Rodney is one of those examples of someone who thought different than me, someone who dreamed a bit bigger than me, but also kind of reinforced to me that there was something special about me and that we could do some really, special and important things together.
How does your wife and kids add to that motivation? How did they make you who you are?
Yeah, I mean, that is that is the bill that has to get paid. So the reality is that, you know, you got to figure it out because you now have real responsibilities. And there's someone depending on you, right, for their well-being. And it's not to say that my wife does not have her own career and she does really, really well, and she continues to advance herself professionally, which is exciting to watch. Um but I think that at the end of the day, that's a responsibility and a burden that I willfully take on of making sure that she's good and that our son is good.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, I want to do for them what my parents did for me, which was provide that level of stability and then eventually the confidence that, you can be more of a risk taker. Like I want my son to live every day as if he can take the biggest risk because at the end of the day, like dad's got me.
Mhm.
And that is a feeling that, my parents still tell me to this day if everything goes bad, like you can always come home. I think that might terrify me more than anything to make sure that that never has to happen. But
Mhm.
the reality is I want my son to feel like he has a safety net, that he can be more aggressive. Because he knows he'll be fine.
Does this feel like a pressure to you or an honor?
I mean, I think that it's an honor always. I think it's a pressure sometimes, right? And I think that in business, you have these ebbs and flows, and business is a roller coaster. And there's times where, things are going incredibly well, and you don't necessarily feel that it's a pressure because, times are good. But when times are bad, it very much feels like a pressure because again, the responsibilities and the bills and showing up for those who you love is a requirement,
Mhm.
and it gets harder to be present when times are not good in business, which I know a lot of people don't talk about, right? Everyone wants to talk about like when it's great and everything's firing on all cylinders, but there's times in business where things are really, 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 really bad, and knowing that once you walk into that door, you kinda have to leave all of that at the door to go be present for your family. That sometimes does feel like a pressure. And when payroll gets cut, right? And who's gonna take the biggest cut on payroll? Of course, that's gonna be me. So but that doesn't, your bills don't take a pay cut,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no
Yeah.
cuts in what's still due, but there's a cut of what's coming in, and sometimes those things feel like pressure. But the reality is that you have to continue to just push and get through it because at the end of the day, the circumstances always change. Things have a way of changing, and they change often in this world.
Have you become accustomed to leaving out all those stressors? Like, just, like, walking in and being fully present with your family? Is that something that you do automatically now, or is it something you're still working on?
I think that I've largely mastered it, but I think that I can always be better at it. So I think there's room for growth, but I do turn it off. I think that that's made for some lonely times because you really kind of want to just lay it all out there for both your friends and your family and my parents. But, the more people you have worrying, now you have to feel the questions of, well, hey, well, how's everything today? And I would rather not do that. I would rather things just kind of get better. And then um, for me to just be able to kind of bask in, I figured it out again,
Mhm,
versus I have to feel the questions of, well, how are things going? Because
mhm,
that can be daunting as well, right? You just kind of don't want to talk about it.
mhm.
So I think being able to compartmentalize keeps everyone else out of it and keeps me in it. And again, I tell people all the time, this is the great reason to have a co-founder because, my business partner is who is living it alongside me and we can talk about all of that and then we can go somewhere else and then we can turn it off. But if I were a solo founder, I don't know that I would be able to do the same thing because I would want someone to feel what I'm going through.
Do you feel like you would have that same type of closeness with a founder who wasn't your friend? Because you and Rodney are pretty close, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, best friends for over 15 years at this point. So, we're kind of like family more than just business partners. And I think that it's possible. I've never experienced it, so like I don't know that it's impossible, but I think that it's possible. I think there are other employees that I feel the same way about, right? Like those who go through the hard times, right? The ones who had to take the pay cut or the pay reductions, or the ones who in the early days may have skipped a pay period so everyone else could get paid, right? There's a certain level of esteem and respect and comfort that you find in that person who is really in it. Because when times are good, you don't really know who's really in it with you. But when times get hard and you start to see the sacrifices that other people are willing to make in order for you to like make ends meet and to take care of the majority, I think that's where you start to gain that respect and comfortability.
Mhm. So is that how you define family, as in people that go through the challenges?
Yeah. And I think I have a number of friends who I consider family as well, right? And it's because you're living through things together, right? It's a collection of experiences that brings you closer together because at the end of the day, very, very few people can understand what you're going through or what you've gone through.
Mhm,
So yeah, to me that really is kind of the definition of family. It's, my parents would say like, what happens in this house stays in this house, right? And that's very similar to a business world, right? Like what happens here is supposed to stay here, right? And it's not supposed to be for the world to know. And some conversations are supposed to be for even a smaller segment or group. So yeah, that's family.
and so, how does your wife, your kid, make who you are characteristically?
Um, I think that in short, I think that I would like I would like to believe that my wife and my son keep me grounded and humble. The excitement that I see in my son, exploring and experiencing the world and many things for the first time is like it kind of like speaks to like that inner child of like look how big and beautiful the world is and things that you take for granted, right? Like things that he's over like to the moon excited about that to me or you or anyone else is just like, oh, like he's really excited about a balloon, right? But like he loves that the balloon, has helium and it stays up a little bit longer than it does if we blew it up with regular air. Like, there's just so many things that I see in him that are exciting. And, for me, that level of curiosity that I see in him as just being, someone who wants to absorb as much information as possible, kind of inspires me to continue to be curious. I don't know that I've necessarily been super curious, like, as a child, like, it was kind of, I wanted my clothes, I wanted my sneakers, I liked my music, I wanted to play basketball, but outside of that, like, I didn't watch a whole lot of Discovery Channel, and I didn't read a whole bunch of books trying to learn, new industries, learning is something that I actually had to learn was important, and I had to kind of learn to do, um, because it was important for me to have as much information to make more informed decisions as I got older, but I didn't necessarily have that curiosity as a kid.
Mhm. And what about your wife, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think my wife, from the perspective of being present and learning how to be present, she's taught me how to be more present, and I think that that actually has helped me in business, um, because you need to show up for someone, and because you're a team, right? You're both family, but you're also a team. You have different responsibilities. And being present is listening when you don't necessarily want to. You've had a long day and you walk in the house and, you know, she may be ready to unload on all of the things that occurred in her life today. Um, and just kind of taking a step back to say, like, this is important to her. Let me put my phone down. Let me turn the TV off. Let me kind of turn off all the things that I'm thinking about in my brain to be present for her right now. Because the more she feels connected to me, the healthier we're going to be. And the healthier our household's going to be, the healthier parents we're going to be for our son. Um, that level of presence is really, really important. I think it's helped me in business as well because being present for your team
Mhm.
is incredibly important.
And so you said they make you grounded. If you hadn't met her, if you didn't have a son, who do you think you'd be?
Um, I think that I would I don't think that I would be lost, but I do think that I would be distracted. I think I would be distracted because there's just so many things that I could be doing, right? That, you're young, your financial life is pretty well put together. You have access to a lot of things.
Mhm.
I've seen what that looks like in many others, and I don't know that I'm so strong that I would be much different.
Yeah.
So, whether that is chasing access, whether that is chasing, you know, people, I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I mean chasing people like chasing, potential companions and things like that. I don't know that I would be much different than that. I think that my spending habits would look very different. So, as we sit here and talk about wealth building, I don't know that I would be very focused on wealth building. I think I would spend a lot more, probably a lot more dates, probably a lot more bottle service at
So you're
clubs.
saying that you would be going to the club and looking for companions?
Yeah, I don't think that I would be at home just reading books all day. No, I don't see that for myself. I would love to say that that would be the truth, but, um, I think that I would occupy my time doing other things, and I'm so thankful that that's not my life because I
Mhm.
see what it looks like, and it doesn't look fun, and it looks very expensive, and I'm happy that I don't have to do that. Now, I'm not saying that being married and having a child is not expensive because that it is, but
But you just mentioned going to the club,
yeah,
which sounds fun. So
yeah,
why doesn't it look fun to you? Like what are the emotions
yeah.
within the people that you see who don't have kids, who don't
Yeah,
have a partner?
some of my financial, we talk about some of the things that I've done that are just not smart and not fiscally responsible, right? Bottle service is a complete waste of money. But living in New York City and living in Los Angeles, right? Like we're spending thousands of dollars on alcohol that some of your friends are gonna throw up. Some of your friends are gonna throw up. It's gonna come out one way or the other, but it's literally a waste of money,
Mhm.
right? It's waste. But you do it because it feels good in the moment and it's fun and you're getting a certain level of attention and
Mhm.
everybody's having a good time. And that's great. And there's a time and a place for everything. But there are individuals who are kind of addicted to that lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? And you think about the compounding effects of wasting that money and spending that money, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, when someone sees this or reads this and sees me at a club and I have bottle service, then remember that I'm still human and sometimes I do things like that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I'm glad that I'm not out, chasing women and I'm not out just spending money frivolously for the sake of the look.
Mhm.
And
So
that is
you think that
something.
people do that for the look? You don't think they do that out of loneliness?
No, you do it for the look. You absolutely do it for the look. There's no reason why you want to go spend a bunch of money at a club buying bottles and the sparklers are coming out. Like no one's doing that to not draw attention to themselves. right? Like, you don't go get a section at the club just to sit in it by yourself. Like, you tend to do that with either a small group, or you do that to attract whatever you're trying to attract to you.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's just what it is, right? There's also a reason why clubs want you to do that, right? There used to be a time where there used to be really big dance floors at clubs. Those don't exist anymore. Now it's majority bottle service, right? It's majority sections, because clubs have realized that I can buy this bottle of alcohol, with a volume discount for $20 or $30, but then I can go charge someone $500 for it. Or I can go charge someone $1,500 for it if you're in New York or Miami or LA or Vegas. So there's a reason why there's a whole industry kind of centered around that. But who they're preying on are individuals who are trying to attract something, or they're trying to fill a void. And I think that it's very much for the look.
And so do you think that comes from ego? Or does it come from because there is, like, a certain perception of people well, that people have of, like, men or women who aren't married. So do you think it's trying to avoid that, or do you think it's just trying to be like, "I'm it, I have money."
No, but I think that for many people, you're gonna figure out a way to spend your money on something, right? Some people spend their money a lot more productively
Mhm.
than others, but it's gonna get spent on something. Everyone likes to talk about, oh, well, Steve Jobs the same outfit 24/7, right? But it wasn't a cheap shirt, and it wasn't a cheap pair of shoes, and money gets spent. Now, they may put a lot of money into investments, which is fantastic, right? Your money's working for you, you're accumulating wealth, and you feel good about it. But everyone has a vice. Now, someone's vice may be sneakers. My vice at one time was sneakers and clothes. Now it might be watches. Eventually it might be cars or boats. Like, everyone's going to have their thing. For some women it's handbags, for some women it's makeup, for some women it's jewelry. Everyone kind of has that thing. So the money's going to get spent regardless. Um, but I think that it's not always about ego. No, I think sometimes it's about what brings you joy in a moment. And I think that people should find ways to spend money on things that bring them joy for much longer than a moment. And that can help do something or create additional capital or wealth that will allow them to have joy in a more sustainable way.
Were there any doubters? How did you handle that?
Yeah, doubters were everywhere. Um, Doubters were former coworkers, doubters were investors. I talk about my father and his feedback of, what's the worst that could happen? You go get another job. Well, my mother was like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, why would you want to do this? It felt too risky, to her. But, the doubters in the early days mostly said, why would anyone want to do this?
Mhm.
And, why would a stranger want to lend a stranger money? And a lot of that doubt came from people who had money, though. So they couldn't understand the concept of, why would someone need $100,
Yeah.
right? Like, what is $100 gonna do? And they don't realize that, that $100 is the difference between lights being on and lights off, or food on the table and not being on, or babies crying because they're hungry, right? So, like, realizing that there's a lot of people who are very much out of touch with the reality that most Americans find themselves in was also what made me feel special, because it made me feel like I knew something, or I had like an inkling about something that most people weren't thinking about. So that's why I felt like I was the right person to go off and do this, because I saw the world differently. Investors, who make a lot of money and work on Sand Hill Road, they too are like, I would never borrow 3 or $400. Like, why would I need to do that? Um, and I probably don't really want to lend money to a stranger either, right? So, like, they had these ideologies that were very much rooted in who they were versus like what the world is,
Yeah.
and that's really what we saw as the opportunity. But the doubters were everywhere, and our basic thesis was, well, people are already doing this. Like, people are already lending and borrowing amongst each other. Even though we don't consider Venmo or Cash App a loan platform, the majority of those transactions are actually someone spotting someone. Like, they're lending people money for different things. And the person who's lending the money is just praying that they get it back, right? But there's no structure around it. So that was a concept. And then more importantly, people give money away every day on GoFundMe, right? But they give it away because they connect to the reason why someone needs it. And that's another thread that we kind of pulled on for what we built. But yeah, the doubt was rampant everywhere. And, you know, we still see them and we still hear some of the doubters, but they're getting a lot quieter these days.
Do you feel like you're still becoming the person who can carry this company long term?
Yeah. I think that that just comes with evolution, right? And I think that, I'm evolving, Rodney's evolving, our team is evolving. And I think that the more intelligent people we can put around us, the more well equipped I think we will continue to be to solve the needs of the people. And, for me, that looks like really smart people around the table. It looks like really diverse people around the table because different perspectives are really important, right? You talk about some of your upbringing as, a Latina, other people's upbringing. Maybe they came from Southeast Asia and they came over as an immigrant for their first time and they work at Google and they were shocked at the fact that they made $175,000 but couldn't get a credit card because they don't have a traditional FICO,
Mhm.
score, right? Like these are a lot of different realizations that are really important to put around the table
Mhm.
so that you can understand where opportunities are presenting themselves. So, as far as I'm concerned, I think that I just continue to learn and listen. And the more that I can absorb from really intelligent people around me with different diverse perspectives, the more well equipped I will continue to be to meet the need of our members.
How much of what you learned in school actually prepared you for this journey and what didn't?
I would say that school really didn't prepare. I don't think that school does a really good job of preparing most people how to be an entrepreneur. In the same way that we don't really learn real like money. We're not getting a lot of money tools and a lot of information around like managing your finances in school.
Yeah.
A lot of what you learn are by having money and then losing money, making bad decisions with money so you know what not to repeat or what not to do again. Then you have, experiences where it goes well and you're saying, "All right, well, let me rinse and repeat that because that went the way that I needed it to or wanted it to." But I don't think that school really prepares entrepreneurs very, very well. I think one of the things that I really want to be able to create for my son the really the exact opposite kind of feeling that I had where it's like I have to go to school. Because if he decides that if he's creative and he has a really good idea and he has a really strong work ethic, if he wanted to start a business, I would want to support that.
Mhm.
Versus saying, "Hey, you have to go to college." I think everyone who does not know what they want to do with their life should go to college, to go kind of figure that out. But if you have a good idea or you have a talent and you're passionate about something, then I want to be able to provide the latitude and the freedom to be able to explore that. But college to me was where I met some of my best friends that are now family. It's where I did learn how to have influence at a bigger scale. So being in college and throwing parties and hosting events where people would support them, and I was able to kind of figure out how do I attract people to whatever it is that I care about in this moment. I think that that taught me how to kind of gather the people, right? And create movements, and things like that. But as far as running this particular business, no, I think it comes down to personal experience and surrounding myself with really, really, really smart people.
What do you think about everyone calling themselves CEOs on Instagram? What went through your head when the title became real for you?
um, yeah, I think that everyone wants to be a CEO, but doesn't really understand what that entails. Particularly the Instagram CEOs who don't have employees and don't have office space to pay for and don't have like real responsibilities. Um, I think that most people, like, I think people should start considering themselves employee number 1. Um, because that's what you are until you actually have a team, right? You know, there was a time where I was a quote unquote CEO, but I didn't have a team, right? I was just employee number 1, and all responsibilities are on you until some later point. But to me, I still really feel like I'm employee number 1. I've been here the longest. I have the most institutional knowledge. I took the biggest risk because everyone who came after had some type of foundation that was set up by those who came before them to where they could take a more informed, they could make a more informed decision of joining this business. But I think that there is too much of an emphasis on wanting to be the head in charge or the CEO. And I think when people start to realize what that seat actually does entail, I think that they quickly start to realize that it's either not what they expected, it's not what they wanted, and it's not what they want to continue to do, right? You know, there's been times where I wish that I wasn't the CEO of this business because of the burden that it puts on, right? And you know, we talk about pay cuts and we talk about salary reductions or you know, skipping a paycheck or a pay period so others can get paid, you have to sacrifice more in that seat than everyone else. And at times, you're happy to do it. And at times, you're not so happy to do it. And um, you know, it's exciting and the reward if everything works out is great. But also the disappointment and the embarrassment of when it doesn't work out is all also on you. And I think that that's probably not discussed enough because most businesses do fail,
Mhm.
right? And the CEOs of those companies, yeah, they'll go on and they'll figure it out. But there is a bit of a stench that you kind of have as you walk around when you couldn't figure it out or you have to get replaced, right? Because that happens all the time. And you know, you want to wear that crown, just know that it's very heavy and that you're renting the space, right? It's not yours forever. There may be a time that comes where someone is better suited to do what you're supposed to be doing.
How do you know when entrepreneurship isn't the right path?
I mean, I feel like many people should know that entrepreneurship is not their path before they start a business. Um, I think that people who are not they don't follow through, right? People who tend to today they make music, tomorrow they make clothes, last week they built houses, you know, the week before that, you know, they were an accountant, right? But like they don't tend to actually do the thing. They're just kind of jumping from thing to thing. I don't think that that's an entrepreneur. Now, yes, you can be a serial entrepreneur and start one successful venture and then go on to do that many times over. That's absolutely possible. But I don't think that the majority of people are set up and well equipped to be entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And this kind of society that we live in where everyone is chasing, I run my own business, I'm the boss, I'm the CEO. It's just like, well, who's really working? Right? Like, because people, you need executors to actually get stuff done. And if everyone's running around saying that they're the CEO, that they're the boss, right? Then like who's actually gonna roll up their sleeves and make it happen? So I think that we've become, you know, pretty enamored as like a culture with being at the top of the food chain. And there's this, for whatever reason, there's this mentality that, you know, if you're not at the top of the food chain, then you don't really matter because, you know, these corporations don't care about the people and they see you as a number and they will replace you at any time. The moment that you take money in from someone else, you now have a boss, right? And I think that we need to start being honest about that because, you know, you start taking money from other people, you have a job to do and you should be responsible and you should deliver on that as best you can because money isn't free and you shouldn't treat it like it is.
What does protecting your joy look like when the business starts taking more than it gives?
Hmm. I think protecting my joy is really trying to figure out what what are the small things that I can do today to like keep me sane, keep me grounded and keep me happy.
Mhm.
Some days that might be taking a trip to release and kind of reset myself. Some days that might be a pair of new sneakers. Some day that might be dessert, right? But like if I can kind of figure out what it is that can bring me some moment or piece of happiness or joy at any given time, I think that that's important. But I think that surrounding yourself with people that you know, love, and care about that can rally around you and give you the laugh that you might need, right? Like protecting your joy or finding joy doesn't always cost money, and many times the purest joy is actually free. And that comes from you having those experiences with those that, you really wanna be around. So, for me, it's staying really, really close to my peer group. I talk to some of my best friends multiple times a week. I talk to my parents still at this point probably every other day. And it just gives me a perspective that, you know, this too shall pass.
Do you remember your first big check and what you spent it on?
Uh, I'll go back to my first big check, not actually being business or work related, but actually in college. We used to get these like refund checks, from loans. And what's crazy is my parents had taken out loans so that I didn't have to really worry about college. And I still ended up taking out a loan because I was seeing my friends get these checks, big checks, call it one, two, $3,000, and they were all coming back with all these new clothes. And I was like, where's everyone getting this money from? And they're like, oh, you didn't get your refund check? I'm like, what refund check? What is that? And they're like, well, if you have a loan, like there's a refund check that you'll get like the beginning of the semester. And while they were probably supposed to go buy books and dorm supplies and like things that mattered during that time or even build a savings for themselves, people were just blowing the money. And I wanted some money to blow too. So I went and I took out a loan and I got this refund check and I went to Saks Fifth Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I started buying every pair of True Religion jeans I could find in 2006 and 7. And at that time, it was like True Religion jeans and Rockin' Republic and 7 jeans and like all of these clothes that I did not need that I just spent like I want to say it was like a $1,400 refund check. Um, I spent every last dollar. And it didn't dawn on me until after I graduated that like that wasn't free money, right? That's all money that has to get paid back. Um, and I was paying back those True Religion jeans for a really, really long time. And I think that that was the first kind of lesson that I learned that I was impressionable and I was doing things that other people were doing, not even realizing that I was in a better situation to where I didn't have to take on the personal loans. My parents, kind of, you know, took on that burden and bared that cross for me, but I decided to do it anyway just because I wanted to fit in.
Why does the money feel so big when it hits and so small a week later?
Um, because when you have the money, you can always find something to spend it on. Um, you know, there's always something that you want. And, my mother used to say as a kid, like, you're just gonna let that money burn a hole in your pocket because it's like you have it and you're like, I can do something with it.
Mhm.
And, you're gonna find something to do. Uh the goal is to figure out, how do you preserve that and how do you grow it? And versus how do you just be a consumer, forever? And there's a level of discipline that requires that most people just don't have, and it's really a muscle, like a financial muscle that I think you have to, like, build, right? Everyone goes to the gym and, you're learning how to build muscle, but there's a financial discipline and what I call a financial muscle that must be, exercised as well. And, when that money is just sitting there and you can put your hands on it, it's easy to go touch and go distribute somewhere, but I think what may be good for a lot of individuals is to figure out investments that are not super liquid, right? Because if it's too liquid and it's too accessible, you can go do something with it. So lock it up, right? Go put it in, some type of treasury bond or a CD or some type of investment vehicle that may have some lockup period, because once it kind of gets out of sight, it starts to be out of mind.
Mhm.
And then once you feel like you don't have access to it, then you start to think about, well, how do I get more money, or how do I make more money that I can use for these liquid things? But I do think that it's important for us to just not always have 24/7 access to all of our cash, because you will find something to spend it on.
How have you recovered emotionally and mentally after overspending or mismanaging money?
I don't think that I dwell on money lost or money spent. I think I quickly turn my attention on to how do I get more. I think I do have very much an abundant kind of perspective of money comes and money goes, but there's so much more money out there to go get. So I don't dwell on it. I have made mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes, because everyone's human, and even though I know the right thing to do, doesn't necessarily mean I will always choose to do the right thing, right? Every I like nice things too. But on the flip side of that, I think I tend to always be thinking about that next opportunity to get money in the door. So as I'm thinking about spending money, I'm also thinking about how am I replacing this money, so that I don't get to the point where I'm sitting back and wondering, well, where is it all? Right? Where did it all go? Um, I tend to be in a state of mind of, if I'm gonna do this, what smart thing am I going to do as well to ensure that I don't end up in a bad situation? But don't dwell. I think too many people dwell um, on their financial circumstances and decisions that they may have made, but that decision was already made. The outcome is already here. What are you going to do about it now? Versus just sulking on, past decisions, past decisions, excuse me, that were made.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In your life, where do you draw the line between treating yourself and doing the most?
I think I tend to just do the most. Um, I think that, again, kind of going back to this abundance mind state or mindset. I feel like better days are always going to come, and that can be great, and that could also probably be dangerous. I think for me, it's tended to work out for me,
Mm.
but I don't. I tend to treat myself, and by treat myself, I tend to get most of what I wanted. I think my parents maybe have spoiled me as a kid, where I got everything for the most part that I wanted. I had absolutely everything that I needed, and most of what I wanted is probably the way that I would say it. But I continue to kind of walk that road as an adult for myself. Um, there's not many things that I can think of that I don't have today that I really, really, really want, which excites me, because one day when I have a lot more money, there's not going to be a whole lot of time to make up for. Because I didn't stave off everything that I wanted until I got this, and then I just go crazy. I think that it's more so, all right, cool. I have even more stability now, and I can make even more investments now, and I can grow this money even better than I would if I were excited to come into it. But no, I think I do the most. My wife would definitely tell you that I do the most.
How do we intentionally plan for joy in the same way we plan to pay bills or stack savings?
I think that you have to figure out what it is that brings you joy. Because joy means so many different things to so many different people. But if you could figure out what it is that makes you happy, maybe that is working a remote job where you feel like you have the freedom to not be on the rat race or the traffic jam to get to work, right? Like, maybe that's joy for someone, where they just feel like they have more time to themselves or more free time. But you have to first figure out what that is to you, because what's joy to me is not what's joy to you. It's not what's joy to Rodney, and so on and so forth. But also do realize that bills must be paid, and there's no joy in the world that is going to be significant enough to keep a roof over your head, right? Or to make sure that your family is cared for. So there are trade-offs, right? I think the most important thing I think anyone can do is figure out what they're passionate about, and what passion they could start to really focus on that provides them some sense of joy, and then figure out how to translate that into money. And again, that doesn't mean that everyone's supposed to go be an entrepreneur. That means that maybe you should pick an industry that you're passionate about. You really like music? Go work in entertainment. You really like clothes? Go work in fashion. If you really like, finance and you want to change the world, go work on Wall Street or go work in Washington D.C. But like, go figure out how to turn your passion into an income, and through that, I think that you will be joyful because not only are you making money and you're paying your bills and you're keeping yourself afloat, but you're doing it in a way that you're not regretful every day when you wake up and have to report somewhere. I do think there's too many people working jobs that they don't care about, and I think that not only hurts them, I think it also hurts the businesses and the companies that they work for. Because if you hate it and you're not happy about it and you're probably not going to always show up well, and that business is going to suffer. So why do that to yourself and why do that to your employer? Go figure out what it is that you care about, and go be passionate in something that can actually drive an income for yourself.
Culturally, why do we feel guilty spending money even when it's ours?
Um, I think that depends on what culture. And culture is a loaded and wide, vast kind of thought. I think for some people, I think some cultures don't really mind spending money. I think um this is probably a different conversation for a different day, and I'm not gonna get myself in trouble. But I think that there is some regret of spending money more frivolously because everyone can't do it. And if you're spending money more freely and your best friend can't do it or your sibling can't do it or someone in your family or your peer group can't do it, um while you may have some initial feeling of I'm different and I'm so lucky and I'm so special that I could spend this money. Eventually, I think what history would tell us, or at least my history of seeing this happen, is that it starts to isolate you and it starts to create resentment from those around you because they can't do the things that you do. They can't take the trip, they can't buy that car, they can't wear those clothes. And if they can't do those things, then you start to feel isolated and they will treat you as such, especially if you kind of rub it in their face, if you will. So I think that that's probably a lot of it. I think that a lot of people, as they continue to accrue some level of success, it does get lonelier, quote unquote, at the top because many of the individuals that you may have kind of come up with, grown up with, may find themselves in very different circumstances where your lifestyles are just different. And I think everyone's afraid of no longer being relatable. And when you're no longer relatable, you feel like you're being ostracized. And that I think that that's largely true. I think that we live in a society now where it's like eat the rich. Many people think that there shouldn't be billionaires. And for whatever reason, someone who is a billionaire feels pretty ostracized. Now, they're probably pretty happy that they're pretty comfortable, but I can guarantee you everyone that they grew up with is also not a billionaire.
How do you know when it's time to pause the grind and actually celebrate yourself?
That's something that I'm still learning. And Rodney and I have talked about that a lot. We don't celebrate many of our wins. We tend to harp more on the losses, or we tend to harp more on what's not going really well. And I think we're trying to learn how to turn off the noise and like celebrate where we are. I think that we work in a world, and particularly once you take in venture capital, that you're now responsible for someone else's money. Experience the win, but you're then immediately thinking about, all right, well, what's next? Right? I got to this revenue milestone, but what's my next revenue milestone? I got to this, user base number, but what's next and what's next? Because that is the treadmill that investors largely put you on, right? And it doesn't stop at venture, if your company goes public, right? Like now you're a public company and you have public stakeholders and those quarterly earnings reports come out, and if they don't look the way that they're supposed to look, you look really bad, right? You look like a poor leader. It looks like, there's going to be a lot of questions around you. So I think that for many entrepreneurs, especially of like those who are growing, really scaling large, fast growing businesses, you can't really stop and smell the coffee that much because you know that someone tomorrow is coming to eat your lunch. So you're always on alert. And I think that, yes, in many ways that's unhealthy, but in many ways it also keeps you hungry. And rather than kind of dwell on the negative aspect of that, I kind of embrace being a killer.
Thanks for listening, everyone. The hosts of The Wealth Break are me, Rodney Williams, and Travis Holoway. If you want to stay connected, follow us at The Wealth Break on all platforms. And be sure to visit thewealthbreak.com for additional resources to help you on your journey to building wealth. Our executive producers are Ryan Martz and Malik Saka, with Meredith Barnes as our supervising producer. Catch you next time on The Wealth Break.